Welcome to the Pod Luck Podcast, everyone. This is a conversation podcast about the intersection of culture and faith in the Korean American Adventist community. We thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Kim. I am one of your co-hosts. I am joined, as always, by my other co-host, Chris Chong. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. Having a good day, except for I just ate lunch and I went to Taco Bell. And
that's very brave of you.
I know. I am a man of deep faith. But they forgot my bean burrito, which is my favorite thing actually at Taco Bell. And so
your favorite thing is a bean burrito at Taco Bell?
I think the bean burrito is like the best thing they have at Taco Bell. I really, really like it.
That's your number one favorite thing at Taco Bell?
Like, I always have to eat that. So whenever I get something, there's always a bean burrito. And I mean, it stood the test of time, and it is like solidly so good. Like, I will go to Taco Bell like when I'm just like craving, and I'll just eat one bean burrito. Like, when I don't need to eat a full meal, I'll want that sometimes. But I don't ever order just one of something else. So that's like my favorite thing.
Is it just bean and cheese?
And their red sauce and onions. So pro tip is get extra onions, and it's so good. And actually, what's great about it is you can just microwave it if it's cold, and it's just it's exactly the same. It's so good. So other than that, yeah, I'm great.
All right. So the lettuce thing is just not a concern because you don't get anything with green in.
No, I get other stuff with green, but my bean burrito does not have that.
I see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was illuminating. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Otherwise?
Other than not having a bean burrito today. Pretty good.
Oh, you didn't get your... Oh, I'm surprised you didn't drive out there and like pound on the window and ask for your...
I considered it because it's really close, but I felt really... I would be embarrassed, I think, to do that. So... But anyway, other than that, yeah, it's good. Things are winding down. I think June and July are really busy for me. Mm-hmm. And then this month, August, is busier, or not busier, but busy with like trips and stuff. Mm-hmm. So one of them is like a family trip, which is great. And then two are work-related trips. So one I'm really looking forward to. I think it's going to be good. And then one I do not want to do like at all. But I have to.
I see. Where are you going for your vacation?
We're going to Colorado, and we're going to go to the Rocky Mountains, which I've never been. I was like really on this, like, I must see nature. I must see beautiful nature this year. So it kind of worked out that way thanks to one of my church members who's kind of helping us out, hooking us up with some stuff. And so we're going there.
Mm. You know, when I think of Colorado, when you said Colorado, my immediate thought was the movie Dumb and Dumber.
Aspen.
Yeah.
California.
Speaking of which, just kind of like I don't know if it's a heads up or something, but one of our plans on this podcast is to do like movie reviews. So keep an eye out for that. We'll try to announce it ahead of time so you can watch the movie beforehand, and then you can join us in our conversation from wherever you're listening.
Yeah, because, we're talking about culture and faith and our experience. And so part of that is movies. And so, I don't know, we haven't decided if we're just going to do like old movies and just movies that Jason and I like or, new movies that are out right now. Like there are some big stuff out right now, like Odyssey is out and,
Are you planning to watch the Odyssey?
Yeah, actually a couple friends and I were talking about going to the Science Museum here, and they have an IMAX theater, and they'll play it on the IMAX theater. So we were talking about maybe watching it there.
It's not the 70 millimeter though, right?
I have no idea. It's just all IMAX is IMAX to me, man.
That is not true. There are
multiple... I know that.
Oh,
I know that. I'm saying to me because I know nothing. But it's huge. It's like, the ones at like science museums. It's not just like a really big movie theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's for people who don't know, and Chris, IMAX, there's multiple different types of IMAX. But the ideal one to watch is 70 millimeter because it's film. So they literally bring these like massive reels of film and they project it old school style. It's crazy. In New York, they're reselling tickets for like $1,000
to watch it on the 70 millimeter IMAX.
Yeah, there's only like 30 or 40 theaters in the world that can do it.
Oh, that's crazy.
Like there's like 19 in America, so people are flying for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the movie. Did you read it in high school?
No, I probably was supposed to. I probably read the Spark Notes or Cliff Notes.
I see. Yeah, so today's podcast, we are going to be talking about something that I think is on everyone's minds. Every church deals with it. Every church discusses it. Every pastor in a pastor's meeting, whether you're at the conference, the NAD, the GC, we all talk about it. It's, I would probably say is it the single biggest issue that kind of comes up in church? Today we're talking about why young people or people leave church. Do you think that is like the number one like issue or talked about thing among churches?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a very popular topic, a big topic that not only are people always talking about, but trying to come up with initiatives and things to either improve or fix the problem or bring people back. So, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where it's been a problem for so long. Sometimes like we don't talk about it too because it's like, oh, this is just like the state of things.
Right.
But yes, it is certainly on the minds of people and church leadership always, and conference leaders are always talking about how do we grow younger? How do we grow younger? How do we not just age, our church does not just age out. And, there's like different initiatives from my conference in California about working with Fuller with their Growing Young program. And all of that is about this particular issue.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about it. We wanted to tackle it. We want to bring kind of our perspective to this conversation. Some theories we may have about how we can maybe address it. And the thing is, I think we need to say from the beginning is, I think a lot of times with these kind of big picture issues, we're looking for like the answer. And the thing is there's never a singular answer because the issue is not that simple. If it was just a singular issue with a single problem, someone would have figured it out by now. But this is a problem that has many different facets. And because of that, there are multiple different answers and multiple different methodologies of addressing this issue. And so the first thing that I usually kind of look out for when I'm in a setting where we talk about it is if someone's like, okay, the answer is... There's no such thing as the answer. It's multiple answers, multiple approaches to this issue. But yeah, I think for me and my generation, this is something that hits a little bit closer to home because it is my generation that has kind of left. I mean, your generation obviously did that too, Chris. But for your generation, there's a little bit of a coming back. Right, so Generation X is kind of slowly coming back. Millennials is kind of one to be determined, but two, it seems like they're leaving for different reasons. You made a face. Would you like to respond?
Oh, we don't have to go through this again, but we already have dealt with this at length on this podcast. That I am not a Gen X man. But we don't have to go into that.
Sure.
But I would agree with you in saying the stories surrounding people leaving the church are so multifaceted that there's no silver bullet for sure. And people leave for so many different reasons. There's a cultural elements to it. There's faith elements to it. There's family history. So there's like, it's so much. It's like, And so, yeah, I would agree that it's nuance, and to approach a young person who has left the faith without understanding the nuance is a good way to keep pushing them away, right? So, like, we have to understand the complexity of people's experiences that lead them out of church. That you can't just come at it with too much simplicity. We got to understand that, and we got to hear them in order to have a meaningful conversation about their experience with any hope of drawing them back.
And yeah, I think the reason why they leave church is really important because that kind of shapes how we approach it. And, you know, I was saying it kind of half kiddingly, but I mean, as in calling you part of Generation X, which I mean, it's anyway, we don't have to talk about that. But yeah, generation, and we're generalizing here, right? Obviously, different people might leave for different reasons, but generally speaking, Generation X left church. They just kind of left. They went to college, they left home, and they just kind of drifted away. And there was no like trauma. There wasn't really like a pushing away. They just drifted away. And then now we're seeing once, you know, they have kids, they're kind of coming back with kids. So it was just kind of like maybe it was a season of life thing. I'm not really sure, but it was just drift in, and then they kind of came back. Millennials, it seems like, is very different. At least with my friends who've left the church, most of them left because they have some trauma with church. There was a reason they left the church, and the way that they view the church is far more negative than someone who just casually drifted. And, you know, they can come back or not. And so that's what we mean when we say the reason why someone leaves is really important. Someone who casually left, you could convince them to come back for an event or, you know, some special thing. There's no real animosity. But someone who left because or due to trauma, yeah, like a praise night, it's not going to bring them back. You know, a harvest festival for kids, not going to bring them back. And so knowing why they left is really important in the approach you take to try to re-engage with them.
Yeah, so I would definitely echo that. And I think you really can't overestimate the power of like a good conversation where you listen to what they have to say without trying to interject your opinions and thoughts. So I think it's like, I mean, I think we'll talk later about how to respond, you know, what we can do later. But yeah, the power of listening is really key here, and like really hearing what they're saying versus you trying to help them understand what you're saying. And I would say that a lot of people, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but a lot of people who walked away, they maybe can't even fully articulate the real reason.
Sure.
Like they'll say some things, but there requires some discernment to understand really what it is, you know, that hurt them, or where that trauma really comes from. Because they may say something and you'll be like, that's a really bad reason to leave church. But actually, that's not the real reason. That's kind of how they say it, but there is more under the surface. So,
yeah, and I think at least when I've talked to people who left the church, and at least they're talking to me, like the goal is not to get them back to church, at least for that conversation. The goal is, I want to, like, why did you leave? And then to what you said, do you know why you left? And then from there, you know, it doesn't matter. But the goal, I don't think, should be like, oh, from this conversation, I'm going to convince you to come back to church. Yeah, you might as well just push them out more in that case.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that everyone left the church because they stopped believing. I don't think that's actually true. I think that's actually far less than the norm. I think more people leave not for specific faith reasons, or like they don't believe in God anymore, and so they stop. I feel like that's fewer. More people leave for other reasons and maybe stepping out from it, and their influences lead them to stop believing later on. But I have found that it's not really like, okay, so if I just convince them, if I just do apologetics and convince them of like why God makes sense or why God is real or whatever, oh, they're gonna like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I'll be there next Sabbath. You know, it doesn't really. That's not really how it works.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, I think especially from like a Asian American perspective, uh, older Asian American perspective, I think they think people leave because they don't know. Like they lack information about faith in God. When in reality, most of my friends who left church, they could probably still do a really good Bible study because they know all the information. They went to church for the first like 20 some years of their life. They went to Sabbath school. They did Bible study. They have all the information. The thing is the information is meaningless. It's irrelevant in their life. And that's the issue. It's not a knowledge thing. It's a relevance thing. And I think as a church, particularly as Adventists and particularly as an Asian American, Korean American Adventist, we're really good at sharing and teaching information, but we are not so good at making that information like relevant or applicable in everyday life. I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, that's probably true. We live in a world of too much information. Right?
Too much
Like,
information, and then even like, we call it fake news, but like, truth is also kind of a meaningless statement too. Like, what is true? I decide what is true for myself. Like, so information itself has lost a lot of meaning.
And so if people want to learn about things, they can learn from YouTube. They can learn anywhere. They can look up. They could ask ChatGPT. They could ask AI, hey, what is the beliefs, understanding the beliefs. So like, that's not the issue. I think the question or the issue that you bring up of relevance is a really important one. I think from like the pastoral perspective, growing up in the church and receiving the training we received, like, I don't feel like that was the main focus. Teaching us to teach or share or present in a relevant, meaningful way for people. It was kind of like, and I think this was kind of the thought process, is like the truth is relevant regardless of context. And that was true in a different time in our country, but not so much now. And I'm not saying that the truth of scriptures are not relevant. They're extremely relevant, but they can be presented in a way that is irrelevant, which leads people to think that the truth itself is irrelevant, if that makes sense, which is a shame.
Yeah, it is. And, I think for most of, and I'm speaking again from my experience, so that's exclusively in the Korean American Adventist Church, but there's definitely like a bubble that you're in, right? For me, in Maryland, for a lot of us growing up, actually most of us didn't go to academy. In fact, none of my friends went to academy. None of the older generation or the generation after me went to academy. We all went to public school. Even college, the generation above me, like half of them went to Andrews, but mostly everyone else, we stayed in public university. And even then, there's a little bit of a bubble effect that we had. And the reason why I bring this up is, when you're younger, when you're like our kids' age, your faith is kind of given to you by your parents and your teachers and your church leaders. And throughout the course of your like early life into early teenage years, it still continued to be given to you. But what our church fails to do for the most part is challenge that faith. There's no space in our churches really where we kind of go, okay, you're now in high school. You've learned, 15 years worth of the Bible. Is it your faith or is it the faith that's been given to you? And for most people, it's the faith that's been given to them. And I don't know about your kind of spiritual journey, but for me, the biggest turning point was when someone in my church was intentionally trying to challenge my faith and asking questions and really forcing me to like really think about like, okay, why do I believe the things I believe? And that process is what changed everything. And so even now today, 20 some years later, when I do have a crisis of faith, which happens very frequently, the level of faith may go down, but like the kernel, the authenticity of the kernel is still there because I still know what I believe, and I'm just kind of trying to reconstruct it when I have these crises. I don't think that's a normal thing for a lot of our churches. I mean, what do you think? Because you're on a different part of the country than I was. What's your experience?
Yeah, I would say that that's probably largely true, and I think the importance of having an experience of challenging one's faith and simply asking the question, what is it that I believe and why do I believe it? I think that's a part of every person's story. And everyone who has deep faith now, they had that time or multiple times where they asked those questions, where what they believed no longer fit the reality in front of them. And so they had to reconstruct or reconstruct their faith so that it made sense once again for them. I feel like, there's definitely not one time people go through that. They go through it multiple times. So I grew up in public school as well. So I constantly was asked, why do you go to church on Saturday? Why do you keep Sabbath? What is Sabbath? Like, that happened all the time for me. I was a part of a Christian club, and so it would happen among the Christians. It would happen in class among the non-Christians. My own friends would like make fun of me about it. They would like, "Hey, you're in a cult, man, like Christian cult," and then I would have to defend myself. And it's almost like whether or not I had a good defense, it was just the process of me having to go through that. And like, in a way, it's kind of like it worked for me. And so I just needed to have something to be able to share. And then so I went to college at a public campus as well. And during that time, I did spend a lot of time with non-Adventists. And so those conversations came up over and over again. And the reality, though, is like I didn't even fully understand Adventism till later. So even in college, like I remember this girl, she's an Adventist girl, and she was like, when I decided to go into ministry, because it was in my freshman year of college, I decided to do that. She like said like, "Hey, do you know this? Like one of our doctrines, like one of like the 5 pillars." And I was like, "Really?" She was like, "Are you sure you want to be a pastor?" So I don't know, like because and the reason I bring that up is, and this is a question I want to offer you. Like, I don't know if our kids are even knowing enough to be challenged. Like, if you ask like a high schooler, I don't know how much of them, a college student, a grad student, like how much of them really understand like what does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be Seventh-day Adventist, especially? I feel like I don't know. So part of that challenging experience also needs to be preceded by like a meaningful formation period as well, which that's another question, I guess, for another podcast. I will say, though, that I remember our youth pastor, Jonathan, one time had a meeting with a youth pastor in one of the big churches here in Portland. So it's pretty well known. It's called Bridgetown. John Mark Comer was the pastor. And so Jonathan was able to have a meeting with the youth pastor, and they were talking about youth ministry. And what he said, the way he felt like his role is to like ask them so many questions about their faith to get them to the point where they'd be like, I don't know. And then like, then you can start. Then you can start that. So like he would at every opportunity be like, why? Really? And Jonathan's really good at that too. He's good at kind of like poking you and like cutting away all the stuff. So
no, and when you said that, that's literally what happened to me. In college, I was working at Virginia Church as a children's pastor, and so the EM pastor was one of my really, really close mentors. And so we would drive to church together. It's like an hour and some odd minutes from our house, middle of nowhere in Virginia. And that's basically what happened in the car ride. Why do you believe that? Why? Really? You think that? Why? And it was like overwhelming, but it forced me to like, okay, yeah, why? And that is what was a catalyst for my faith to become my own, because I had to constantly think, why do I believe what I believe?
And I think the reality is that should happen in church.
Yes.
Because that's a better place for that to happen than the internet or
Right,
like
because it's a
public
very
college.
safe place, right?
Yeah.
Because the pastor at Bridgetown, Pastor Jonathan, you, my mentor, even us, when we do that, we're not doing it to be like pedantic, or we're not doing it to be mean. It's because we want you to kind of strip away the faith to its most basic component and ask the question like, what is your faith? What do you believe in, essentially? So it's done with intention and with the purpose of trying to make this faith stronger. And the important thing is when it kind of reduces to that I don't know, that's, like you mentioned, that's when the recreation or the rebuilding starts, and you are a resource to that. Because when someone has a question of like, well, why does God allow bad things to happen? You as a spiritual leader can now give them the full context of that, whatever question it is, with scripture, with doctrine, with, all these things. So you're helping them rebuild it, which is the important part, right?
Which is why, like, and I think this maybe can be a part of like the trauma or whatever. When people have those questions and are shot down or reprimanded for having those questions and doubts, like that, like we have to understand those questions and doubts are a good thing.
Yes.
Right? But I think that most times we don't think they're good things. We think they're rebellion or they're like rejection. But they're really questions that, I don't know, let's be honest, sometimes they come out and like the spirit of it is kind of like, I don't know, like they think they know everything and whatever, right? But really deep down, those questions and those issues that they bring up are questions of growth that will precede growth and deepening of faith. So that's why when people are like, hey, you can't ask that question, or like are given simplistic answers, those things do more harm than good, I think, for a questioning person.
Right. And here's the thing that people, I don't think, fully understand. We think doubt is the opposite of faith. It's the antithesis of faith. But faith can't exist without doubt. You need doubt for faith to exist. And so when you eliminate doubt, you've essentially, you're limiting faith as well. The example I love to give is like working out. When you want to build muscle, you need resistance, right? That's how I can't just do this for an hour and expect my chest to get bigger. I need to have a resistant thing in my hand to provide, strength training. And so in the realm of faith, doubt is the resistance. That's what builds your faith. And that's why when you said like these things should happen in church, the gym is church. When you go with a spotter, you're able to, one, you're safe because someone's watching and making sure you're not going to hurt yourself, but it's the proper space for you to exercise your faith in church. So this idea like you should remove doubt in your life, that's not true. You need doubt to build faith. The problem is if doubt becomes overwhelmingly large relative to your faith, that's where issues happen. If I try to lift 600 pounds, there will be problems, right? So that is kind of where the leadership, mentorship, pastoral element comes, is to make sure that doubt isn't overwhelming relative to faith. But doubt must exist for faith to grow.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy. So I like the idea of the spotter. And that's kind of like the person who helps them work through the doubt. So I was just wondering, who should be your spotter? So, and I think this is a beneficial question for someone who is either doubting, like who can they go to? Like who would you recommend they go to? Or a person who, like, someone came to them and like how to be a spotter. So like, first of all, who should be the spotter of like a young person going through this kind of experience?
I mean, I think ideally, like if you have a youth pastor, that's the person. Anyone, really, I think the bigger answer is anyone who's been through this and anyone who understands this is a spotter, right? Because you will have instances where the pastor may not understand or agree with what we're saying. Then they not only should not be your spotter, they will not be your spotter just because they won't kind of answer the questions or ask the questions. But anyone who understands this and wants people to kind of challenge their faith and make it their own, that is a person who can be your spotter because they know what they're trying to do and they understand the process and how to help someone. That's what it is, right? How can I help you to do this? That's who you need.
Do you think parents are good spotters or not good spotters?
That's an interesting question because I felt like for my generation, the answer is no. But as I'm not really involved in youth ministry anymore, but from at least where I stand looking, the relationship from child to parent has dramatically changed in the last couple of generations. I think the big reason is because they both speak the same language now.
Yeah.
My parents and I couldn't communicate, as we mentioned in our parent podcast. So yeah, I think for a lot of our younger people, your parent could be a spotter. Should they be your only spotter? That I don't necessarily think so. I think it's beneficial to have someone who's not in your family also kind of do that. But yeah, I think now a parent could be one of your spotters.
Yeah, because from my perspective, I'm all about kind of like your first discipler is your parent, and like the primary responsibility of raising up a child in the church and in Christ is the parent, not like outsourcing to the youth pastor, the pastor. And so, yeah, I feel like, and I think parents don't think they have a role in this because by this time, if their kids are like teenagers, there's a kind of like this separation that happens between parents and their teenage children. And so they kind of feel like their influence over their kid is much less because, the kid's always rebelling and always like arguing and stuff like that. But talking to people and teenagers, even though they act like that, the voice of the parent is still very important to them, and maybe it comes off rebellious, but actually your words as a parent, even in the realm of faith, matter quite a bit, and so I guess I want to counsel parents to embrace those questions of doubts that your children bring to you, and there are great opportunities to, at the very least, connect with your child, at this place where you can identify and relate to them with the question, and you can share your own stories of doubt and questioning as well. And so, yeah, I think parents should definitely be involved in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, it's so much easier now because the nature of the relationship has changed with the second and subsequent generations. So absolutely, you should be involved. Even before this process, when they're really young, you are the ones that are kind of forming their faith to begin with. And, there's like that Bible verse, like, faith like a child. Well, when your kid is a child, the faith should be of a child. That's you. You are providing the faith and the structure of which their future faith will lean on. And again, kind of based on what you said, we don't want parents to think, okay, we built this structure until you're like 13 years old. Now you go. I mean, there is an element of that, obviously, but you are still part of that journey. Your role has changed probably significantly since they're like, 7, 8 years old to when they're like 15, 16. But it is so important. And from a pastor's perspective, discipleship and ministry is so much easier when I know the parent is there on the other side, kind of working in tandem with the pastor. It's night and day difference.
I wanted to ask another question of you. So you mentioned the idea of relevance, and like a person will leave faith or, not go back to faith because they don't feel like it's relevant anymore. And I think that's an important term to define, like what you mean by relevance. Like what makes something relevant and what makes something irrelevant.
Yeah, so this is just kind of based on my friends who start going to church. Like you said, they're not atheists. They're not even agnostic. If you press them, they would say they believe in God. They believe in the tenets of Christianity. They believe in most Adventist doctrine. When I say relevant is if all of that disappeared, all the Christian doctrine and their belief, their life wouldn't change. Like nothing would change in their day-to-day life. And that's reflected because by and large they live life without those things as a part of their daily living. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say it's become irrelevant. It's just there's not a point in their life where those kind of Christian beliefs and doctrines and faith ever comes up in life. And yeah, it's that's where it's really hard, because I try to, I talk to them and I kind of want to figure out why they think the way they do, why it is irrelevant to them. And yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. It's not a part of their life. They don't think about it ever, if at all,
And then, so like, that means, would you say that their experience or the faith they received and lived for a time when they were in the church, they came to a conclusion that this faith or this lifestyle or this way of life, it doesn't affect me, or it doesn't make a difference to my life, and then it leads them to the conclusion then, this doesn't really matter. Is that kind of what you're saying?
A little bit. I mean, I don't know if it's that like concrete either. I don't think they ever sat down and was like, you know what? None of what I was taught is relevant. Like, I don't think it's like that singular of an event. It's just because they don't own their faith and because they haven't spent the time critically thinking about their faith. When someone asks them, they just kind of give the general answer that we're taught to give. And I think the minute there's a little bit more of a pushback, it's just like, I don't know. And I think that's what it boils down to. Like, I don't know, whatever. And they don't want to engage in the conversation anymore. And then as that keeps happening, I think there is a moment where they're like, does this matter? Do I want to spend time like really thinking about this? And by then there's so many other things that's happening. You're going through school, you're finding a job, you're, dating, maybe like engage, whatever. And so it just keeps getting pushed down the list of priorities. Whereas in high school, like, there's not a ton of things that's ahead of this, right? Maybe if you're super into sports, SAT, school, and then it's like church. But as you get older, there's more stuff that slots in. And that's, I think, something I found too. As they get older, as life happens, church and faith just keeps going down the wrong.
And it's just inconvenient. Like going to church is inconvenient if you don't have the convictions. It's like, it takes a lot of your time. It takes money in terms of giving, like that's expected of you. It takes volunteering. And so like, if you come to a place where like, you know what, the things that I believe, they don't line up, but yet I am committing so much time, like it's just easier not to. And then turns out life seems easier actually without it.
Right. And you don't go to church and you realize your life hasn't changed significantly, right?
Yeah.
Life is still good. Sometimes people, your life gets better. You have Saturdays off, like, so that disconnect, cognitive dissonance happens. Someone mentioned to me, like, going to church on Saturday is like difficult. Like, actually Sunday would be a little bit easier just because with the timeline and everything, like it's just more of a harder interruption to like have Saturday off and then have to do stuff on Sunday, which I thought was interesting. That's another thing that I think as Adventists we don't always consider. We just assume everyone's going to take the Saturday off, but in the larger, I guess, cultural or societal level, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I've heard something similar recently as well, which is something that I think we're going to explore in a future episode, because it came up in a conversation about like an Adventist not marrying a non-Adventist. And so within that topic, and so that is on kind of the slate for us to talk about in a future episode about that kind of experience, which I think is happening more and more. So Jason, like, what can we do? What can we do? What are some approaches we could take to do our best for our young people to stay not so much in the institution of church, but like stay in the faith and continue a meaningful walk with God?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is where we kind of go back to the idea of like, there's, not one singular answer. This is just my personal opinion. I mean, there's like the simple answer and there's a bigger answer. The bigger answer, I think we can explore more as a standalone podcast episode. But, we always talk about like the different generations, right? Generation X, and Millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. And, it's like kind of cool to talk about, but that actually does play a significant part in the way we approach church. And for a lot of people who are Generation X and older, you may feel like it's really hard to kind of engage with someone who's Gen Z. And there's a reason for that. Granted, every generation is like you clash with the generation above you. That's just the history of humanity. That's always been the case. But there is a reason why there's a gap between Gen X and Gen Z. And we call that metamodernism. And we're going to talk about that later. So that's kind of like the longer answer. The shorter answer is I think we need to provide more safe spaces for them to challenge your faith. I think one of the pastors in our circle, Pastor David Kim, he gave a presentation and he talked about how for a lot of young people, church has become a place of judgment. And I think that's really true, especially in Korean churches. And this is not an Adventist specific thing. I think all Korean churches, there's an element of judgment that takes place in church. And why would you voluntarily go to a place that makes you feel bad? So I think creating more safe spaces for people to kind of, they're able to unpack the phrase we use, and I think there's been a backlash to this phrase, is you mentioned it, deconstructionism, the idea of deconstructing your faith and then reconstructing it. I don't know. I feel like it's really important to do. I know there's a lot of like big celebrity Christian figures who vehemently disagree with me, but that's what I did, and it helped significantly. It changed my life. It sounds like something that's what you did, changed your life. I think is really important. And like you said, church is the space, the safest space to deconstruct and reconstruct your faith. So I think if we can do that in our churches, it will help significantly. What about you? What do you think?
I'll give the answer that's going to solve everything.
Okay.
I actually know that answer. I'm just kidding. And I want to share my thought on this because it's kind of like out of left field, and it's in my mind a very helpful thing to do. I can't say it's going to change everything completely, but what I have found, at least for my life, and I don't want to speak too much in general about people's experiences who went through this, but a lot of times the reasons why we feel it's irrelevant is because we stand at the center of our own universe in our own kingdom. And the reality is that if we are about really ourselves, the kingdom of God stuff is either irrelevant or in opposition to our kingdom. So the more it is about us, the more we will not want it by nature, I think. And so, and this is where my kind of thought is, and I think this is what we can do. I think we can emphasize service more in church. And that's really what it is, like service and giving. And the more we make our faith less about ourselves and what faith can do for me and what God can do for me, I think is better. And so, like, I know in our youth group, that's kind of the key thing is raising up not just like Christians and helping them learn more, but teaching them to be leaders and to be people who give and contribute to the church. And I feel like that puts people on a different wavelength, and they think differently about their faith. And I think within the context of giving and serving, this question of faith and doubt and relevance, it's a better place to have that conversation. Because the reality is when you are serving and giving, like in the youth, like you are connected and having experiences with other kids who are committed to church and to your pastor, and it creates a more organic space for a safe conversation about that to happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you might have heard, like, a lot of millennials who left the church, they accuse the church of being hypocrites. And the reason why they believe that is because the church purports itself to be the thing that helps other people, right?
Yeah.
That's what the church is supposed to do. And that's what Jesus constantly tells, in the Old Testament, the Israelites, and, New Testament, the church, like, you have to be the ones to be there for the oppressed and those who don't have. And the hypocrisy from the view of millennials is that's what you say you're supposed to do, but when you go to church, you don't see any of it in the church. And that is that one of the disconnects that happens with my generation. And to your point, if the church is able to shift a little bit and kind of, I'm going to use the word rediscover the purpose of church, it will go, I think, a long ways into helping people understand the role of the church. And in fact, the one element or the one aspect of church that brings even non-believers back to church is in grief. When someone passes away, when someone dies, that's when you have people who are not like practicing Christians, they come back, because that is one of the times in our church service where it's purely for the service of someone. The whole worship service and everything around it is to serve that grieving family or person. And that's unsurprisingly when most non-believers engage the most with the church. And so I think that shift needs to happen from the church as well. We need to be more of, like you said, service-oriented, kind of aligning more with the kingdom of God principles than the kingdom of self.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of things that we can talk about, and we'll talk about it in subsequent podcasts, especially the concept of metamodernism, which for me is like a very big thing I've been trying to like spend time studying, and it's been my passion project. And I think it's very much connected with why it is that younger people are disconnected from church. It's because the way that they perceive the world has fundamentally shifted from Gen X and earlier postmodernism. And so it's hard to approach this issue without knowing and exploring how they think versus how you think. And so that's the first step, I think, in that approach.
So our next episode will be exploring the concepts of metamodernism and what it means for our beliefs and our church, and what it looks like to implement or understand this thinking, within our communities.
Yes, that is the plan. We hope you join for that. But thank you for joining our podcast today. We hope that this was enlightening, and we hope that it starts more conversations. We end every podcast by saying, hey, talk about it. But like, really, actually talk about this in your church, whether it's at your potluck or even like maybe a small group or Sabbath school, or just kind of spontaneously bring it up. Because like we said, this is something that every single church in this country, whether you're Adventist or not, we talk about. And like we've always said, the answer is not singular, it's multifaceted, and a lot of the approaches will start to form through conversations at your local church. And so we want to encourage that.
Yeah, and with that, like, if you are a person someone came to with questions and doubts, if it's your own children or if it's somebody else at church, like, consider that a privilege. That is a like a mark of honor that they would come to you with that. Like, I hope you don't think of it as a burden and like, oh, why are they asking me these questions? I don't know. Like, consider that a compliment, because they're coming to you because they trust you and see something in you, either in your understanding, your practice of faith, or they see something in the relationship that you have with them where they feel like it's a good place to start. So like, embrace it, welcome it, and celebrate it honestly. And it's okay to say, I don't know. And I think that's the thing. Like, don't feel the pressure to figure out all the answers. Just say, I don't know. And then just continue that relationship. And so don't shy away if someone comes to you.
Yeah, and for anyone who's in that position and you're kind of feeling lost, feel free to reach out to us. We're not necessarily saying that we will tell you everything, but we can connect you because we are also part of a vast network of pastors and leaders. We can connect you with someone who can help you, who guide you through this process of you guiding someone else too. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have specific questions. But thanks again for joining our podcast. Again, we hope this triggers a lot of conversation and thought. And we are, again, as always, very thankful for all of you who join and listen. Have a wonderful week, everyone.